Maybe it's just the cloudiness. It started out a beautiful day, and now the clouds are rolling in. And you ever notice that sometimes your whole day changes? Today, I want to talk about something that I don't think that I've ever preached on the topic. I've been in some Bible studies. That's the Christian in tattoos. Now, I realize going into this may be a controversial topic. I'm going to do my best to present it in a simple fashion, a straightforward fashion. It is a topic that many Christians would disagree with me on. And so if you disagree with me, if you have concerns about this, I would like the opportunity to study this topic as long as we agree that we are going to allow the Bible to be our guide. If you have a tattoo, I do not want to offend you in any way. And I've already told you where I stand on it, see, before we go into it. But I don't want to offend anyone who may be listening on our YouTube channel or anything like that. Again, if someone's out there listening, I want to have the opportunity to study this topic more in depth with anyone who may disagree with me on this topic. And if we use the Bible as our guide, I believe that you and I, even if we begin a topic in disagreement, we should be able to reach unity and agreement. Several years ago, I was in a meeting with three men. They were older than I was by several years, and they were under consideration to be appointed elders over a congregation. And as leaders of that congregation, the topic came up of issues that I thought that they might face in the coming years that as leaders of that congregation. And that particular group had, at that point in time, several young people. And tattoos were definitely on the rise in society. We see them quite prevalently today in today's society. Go to Walmart. And I guess one of the reasons I decided to talk about this is it is a topic that Neil Grantham and I talked about during the gospel meeting. It is also a topic that has come up at work. A fellow that works for me from time to time that I affectionately know is Grandpa Shepler. He and I were talking. We'd stopped at Walmart, and we just happened to see an individual with green hair and tattoos. And Grandpa said, well, what do you think about this situation that we're in? He said, I went to the doctor's office yesterday, and he said there was more ink than clothing. Mind you, Grandpa Shepler's an old order Amishman. And so I didn't have to wonder where Grandpa stands on that, but Grandpa wondered where I was on that topic. And so tattoos are something that are very high in the priority list, I think, for Christians to talk about. I think we need to talk about them. Oftentimes, and I think oftentimes the church fails. The church fails its members and the church fails the world when we avoid controversial or potentially touchy topics. I don't think we should avoid them, but we do need to handle them carefully. And I will try to do so today in this topic, handling it carefully. But we do a disservice when we avoid topics that people might get their feelings hurt over. It's not that we intend to go and trample on somebody's feelings or hurt somebody in something that we say, but rather we need to speak the truth of God in love. And so there are some things before we get into maybe the meat of this. There are some things that I want us to consider. And the first of that is the Bible, in particular, the New Testament, does not tell us everything that we cannot do. So if someone says that the Bible doesn't say that I can't have a tattoo, first of all, they're incorrect. But second of all, we need to consider that the Bible tells us a direction in which we as Christians are to move. And I guess the reason that I have questioned tattoos myself is that for the last several centuries, Christians of all faiths, up until about 1900, condemned tattoos. The Catholic Church had a ruling on tattoos in the 1700s, I believe, if my date is correct on that. Don't hold me to that date, but I believe it was 1700s. There was a pope in the Catholic Church that determined that tattoos were unbiblical. So you can search your New Testaments cover to cover, and you will not find a passage in the New Testament that says that we cannot, as Christians, have tattoos. And so if you said that the New Testament said we cannot have tattoos, you would be correct. But I do want us to pause and consider that the Bible doesn't have to give us a complete list. If the Bible gave us a complete list of what we are not to do, the Bible nowhere says that the Christian should not engage in recreational drugs. And yet we believe that that is wrong on a number of bases. We're not going to get into that. That's a topic for another day. But think of the volumes of books and think of what God would have had to have done. You know, the word tattoo did not appear in the English language until sometime in the 1700s. So when the King James Bible was written in the 1600s, the word tattoo did not even exist in the English language. And so think of all the words out there, all of the sins that have yet to be invented by man that would have to be listed if the Bible gave us a list of sins. So I want you to think on that and chew that around in the back of your brain for a little bit. What the Bible does is it gives us a direction in which we are to go. There's a principle I want you to consider with me that the Apostle Paul puts forward in Colossians chapter 3. This is one of Steve's favorite passages, I think, in the New Testament. Steve loves this passage in Colossians chapter 3, beginning in verse 5, if you will, because I think that this passage helps us to understand the direction that the Christian is to go. The Apostle Paul says in Colossians chapter 3 and verse 5, "Put to death, therefore, what is earthly in you." Okay, so I want you to step back, analyze your life. And I'll do the same. We need to ask ourselves, what is earthly? Paul gives us a partial list. I want you to understand this is not a complete list, but it's to help get us started in the right idea to understand what is earthly. Paul says, "Put to death, therefore, what is earthly in you: sexual immorality, impurity, passion, evil desire, covetousness," which is idolatry. Now, all of these things, like I said, this is not a complete list, but these are categories in which specific sins can be found. For example, impurity. Well, that could cover a multitude of topics. And we need to ask ourselves as we look at something, is this pure? He says passions. Well, we all have passions, but I dare say that Don's passions, although the more I get to know Don, the more I realize that we have a lot of the same passions about a lot of things we like: tractors, honeybees, etc. But I dare say that we all have various passions in our lives. Some of those passions are good and some of those are bad. Evil desires, covetousness. Now again, here's one of those interesting topics in which we vary greatly. What Dennis values, I'm probably going to be like, has no value. I don't want it. And what I value, Dennis probably would be like, you keep that, you know. And so there are differences there, and these are general topics.